In this recording, I'll address a little bit about how to make decisions on what to include in your online class videos and what to do with your newfound class time. So if you're going to decide to flip your class, I think the easiest place for me to start was the actual flip. So I liked initially to determine what material I thought I could deliver in a taped online format that would be beneficial. So let me give you a little chart I came up with that summarizes the content and format considerations I make in deciding what to include in online videos and what to save for class. So on this half of the diagram, you'll see some considerations that for me suggest the material is well suited to taping. So for example, if the students would benefit from additional guidance from you while preparing for class or for their meeting time with you, then that would be suggestive of something that is beneficial to tape. Additionally, I thought very straightforward material made for very good videos, and that I wasn't concerned that I wouldn't be able to describe it in a manner that a student who wouldn't be able to ask me a question in a live setting would have trouble with. Some particular complex topics, however, are suitable for taping, and those would be ones where a preview of the concept would help the class when they started the concept to have a little bit more grounding. So, providing context to a larger, more complicated question, giving them some tips as they read very difficult material, even if you're not able in the video to actually tackle that complex material head on, I think is also beneficial to tape. Additionally, it's helpful if there will be added benefit to the student from the ability to start, stop, and review the video multiple times. And so, if it's something like a foundational concept that the students are going to come back to in multiple classes or is just core to understanding the concept, then taping it is very helpful. On this side of the diagram, you see things that suggest the content is not well suited to taping. So for example, in areas where I thought my casebook had done a really good job of providing materials that were straightforward and that the students over the years had not had a lot of confusion about, I found that those did not make for good videos. Additionally, there are sometimes concepts where the students' questions are just sporadic, where there's less predictability in the things they're going to be confused by, or a topic that you can anticipate they're going to have some confusion, but that you know they're always very resistant to hearing the explanation. And so, in those situations, I found that being able to watch the student while we're talking about the material to gauge the level of their confusion, either because they can stop and ask a question right then, or because you get some subtle nonverbal cues that they're confused or frustrated, were helpful to me. And there's very few topics I think that really fit in this category, to be honest, because most often I could predict where the confusion would likely be, or the explanation is something that they're not inherently resistant to. An additional category that I would stay away from taping are those that you're going to find difficulty in breaking it up into about 10-minute tape segments. 10 minutes is about ideal. Any longer than that, and it's very difficult for the student to be able to utilize what you really want them to do, which is use this to sit, stop, review if they're really having trouble, or be able just to get some refresher if they're not having trouble and then head into class. If it's longer than 10 minutes, the stronger students are frustrated with what they see as a lot of, outside extraneous lecture. The weaker students are not able to actually get through it and then spend time reviewing and repeating the video if it's longer than about 10 minutes. So any longer than that, it really starts to lose all of your audiences. Additionally, you don't want to tape things that you're going to have difficulty presenting in a visually engaging format. I will tell you that the more videos I've created, the more that I've found I can make something visual out of the content. It comes with a little bit of practice, but we all know ones that we just can feel are going to be difficult for us to display in a way that would make it feasible to watch for 10 minutes. So here's some examples of things that are actually well suited for flipping in law. definitions of legal concepts, preview of a concept, review at the end of a concept, summarizing black letter law, providing basic theory or basic skills instruction, going through those basic hypos that you would cover in class, and giving feedback to students on their own work product. So, for example, I would video over like a turned in paper with my comments recorded on top of the edits on the screen. All right. If you see from each of these, basically this is where I would find that I would spend the first chunk of class often in, providing basic doctrinal concepts, preview of a concept, and providing basic instruction for the introductory hypotheticals. So now I would find myself starting in class maybe at what I used to give as hypo number 4, or application question number 4, because the students would already have been able to meet me there at the beginning of class where they otherwise hadn't been. Here's some specific examples in civil procedure. So, introductory material. So, examples that are foundational that I want them to know and that I don't really want to spend a great deal of time in class per se on, but I want to make sure they understand things like the interpretation or interrelationship between Article 3 and the federal statutes in subject matter jurisdiction. Looking for the language in Article 3, looking for corresponding language in 28 U.S.C. Also, basic preview of concepts, what I would categorize as the what is this kind of video. So what is personal jurisdiction? How does it relate to subject matter jurisdiction if we'd already covered that? If we hadn't, what does this really mean for for our larger question of where can you file suit? Same thing for venue or for subject matter jurisdiction. I found that since most of these you can provide some sort of map to look at whether or not personal jurisdiction is met in the state, whether you have venue in the district, or whether or not you're in the state or federal court for subject matter jurisdiction, it was really helpful. So for example, like transfer of venue and removal, the videos were really helpful to the students because I could use the movement in the slide to show removal itself, like moving a little X from a state court into a federal district court, and for transfer of venue, moving amongst them. Basic content is another good example, like issue and claim preclusion. These are topics that are going to be tested on the bar that I think the students do deal with quite a lot in practice. They're not particularly complicated, but I still found that they struggled and couldn't do them entirely on their own in my class. So by giving them online videos, I was able to shorten up the coverage of issue and claim preclusion very significantly in class. And then we used that time to do other topics that I thought were more complicated and actually required more analytical thought, that it would be helpful to be with me in person in class to do, but that they could handle issue and claim preclusion in a taped format quite easily. Other things like cases. So we have a lot of constitutional cases in the jurisdictional section of civil procedure. I provided a video that discussed the cases that preceded the Grable decision so that students had a context for that. There's been some in the casebook, obviously summarizing what the court had done up until that case, but by providing a little bit more in the way of instruction to the student, they could have more context for this evolving concept. Additionally, I provided videos that helped focus their attention when they read complicated decisions. So for example, the students in my class had trouble sometimes understanding pluralities and really thinking about each of the decisions discretely and then determining where there might be some overlap in theory or approach. And so I just used the video to preview a little bit of the case so that they could listen to it while they were reading the case and have a better focus in coming to class. Really, the things I would provide in maybe the syllabus, guided questions, but just giving a little bit more in the way of instruction, a little bit more of me being there with them, guiding them through the case in the way of the video just helped them significantly. Some other examples include things like academic support, stuff you don't want to spend time in class on, but that I found my students really needed. Things like strategies to answering multiple choice questions, how to write good essay exam answers. I would give a practice problem. Of course, I always provided a model answer. Instead of having a review session outside of class to discuss that answer, what I did was give a voiceover over the outline of the answer or over a model answer and discussed why I thought it was a good answer, how it could be improved, giving them tips about how to write exam answers. And that way they could listen to these repeatedly, focus on them, try and rewrite the answer themselves. I did the same thing for outlining, especially in the rules portion of civil procedure. The students often have trouble with the idea that they need to have a not very rigid or linear outline sometimes, that they need to think of concepts as being more free flowing since you're looking at process. And so I was able to do that in a voiceover. I also provided videos on introduction to basic legal skills. Since I had more time in class and wanted to cover a few more legal skills, I didn't want to use the time in class to give instruction on the basic aspects of those skills, so I did that in a video, and then we did the actual exercise of interviewing a client in class. If you want to do skills, that's a great way to start that. If you don't, you could pick something entirely different to provide in your online instruction and also in class. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, when students turned in things like exam answers, I was able to provide a voiceover in addition to my written comments on their paper by bringing their answer up in a Word document and then recording right over it. All right, so what do you do with your class time? Well, I would encourage you to think that you can actually reconceptualize your role a little bit. You can now be more of a model working through very complex application or skills exercises. Instead of just having to provide the basic doctrinal instruction, you're free to do a lot more. You can also reconceptualize the student's role. They can engage in more peer or team teaching or learning. They can engage in simulations or role plays, or you could have more complicated problem solving where you use multiple different kinds of concepts or topics in one problem. One thing I would tell you when you're thinking about your class time is that you need to think of it in a non one for one, minute for minute idea. In other words, what I mean is if you tape what would otherwise have been a 10-minute lecture in a 10-minute online video, you will find that you will actually have saved more than 10 minutes of class time. And that's because the students, having watched the video, are even more prepared when they start the beginning of class. So they're sort of getting a jump start on the second portion of the learning. I found that it actually triggered them to do more in the way of outside work, even beyond the video on their own, because they had feedback from the assessment piece, the quiz I gave with the video, that they were either struggling or doing well, and it spurred them on to either review a concept they struggled with or even look into new things because they had some confidence. So I found that I actually saved a significant amount of time, more than just what the minute video versus minute of class time would have otherwise suggested. And that would, if you do several of these, it gives you the chance to basically reorder that time. So instead of just using a portion of the class, you can reorder the structure of when you teach things so that you could save time at the end of a topic or the end of a unit or the end of the class even to do larger exercises. When you start and I'll explain this more in a subsequent video, I would suggest not doing too many videos per week just because there's just the amount of time it takes to create them. But over the years, as you have a bank of these, you can really have a lot of control over restructuring your class. Here's some examples of in-class activities you might do. You could do advanced theories or techniques, complex application where you really are engaging in true problem solving, maybe even in topics not necessarily covered in your class, but something that the students have already taken. You could do role plays, simulations. You could create legal documents. You could engage in a policy debate. You could do more group work, or you could involve practitioners in your class. Really, the world is open to you. So the things you feel are your strengths or things you feel like your students really have a need to do, you are now able to do and spend your time focused on leading them through that in class. I hope you found this helpful, and I would encourage you, if you're more interested in learning about the logistics of taping or some tips on how to make sure the students are engaging with the videos, to watch one of my subsequent teaching tips videos.